The topic of our next discussion is lessons from unicorns, deep diving into the secret of success for startups. I don't think they're talking about the magical unicorns. I think it's something else. So now, without further ado, we'd like to bring you our lineup of experienced gurus and experts to share their wisdom and insights with you. We have a regional sales director, Southeast Asia at Mobileye, the Intel company, Mr. Amer Subhi. Chief Strategy and Investment Officer at Travelokas, Mr. Hendrik Susanto. General Partner at Open Space Ventures, Mr. Chesson. Head of APAC Expansion at Transferwise, Mr. Venkatesh Saha. And correspondent at Reuters, Chayut Setboonsarng, who is our moderator for this talk. A round of applause for our panelists.
Okay, so thanks for the introduction. I'm Chayut Setboonsarng, and I'm a reporter with Reuters. And today we have this esteemed panel for us for lessons from unicorns. I'm going to go through our, panelists here very quickly about what they do and the startups they're from and the companies they're with. And we're going to deep dive into what makes a unicorn successful, what sort of things that we have to focus on, and what things to not do. So on my immediate right is Venkatesh from Transferwise, it's the most valuable European fintech startup. And it was founded by the first employee of Skype, right, from Estonia. And the story there is that they wanted to transfer money home, and it was just very difficult. But we'll get more into that later. And Shane is with Open Space Ventures, series early stage investor and one of the early investors in Gojek in the Series A. And then we have Hendrik from Travelokas, the Indonesian unicorn that does online commerce, travel, and lifestyle products. And then Amer from Mobileye, an Intel company. And Mobileye was acquired by Intel in 2017 for $15 billion. So we have all the proper unicorns and all the proper investors here for you, and we're just going to talk about what the secret sauce for the success is. And maybe we'll start with you, Venkatesh, about, can you talk a bit about Transferwise, what it does, and, what you think makes a startup successful?
Thanks, Chayut. As you mentioned, Transferwise was founded by Christo and Tavit to solve a problem that they had in their day-to-day lives. When they wanted to send money from the UK into continental Europe, even 8 years ago, they'd have to walk up to a bank branch, they'd have to fill a bunch of forms, then have a nice conversation with the teller, and then head back home. And then they wouldn't really know when the money would arrive at the other end and how much would actually arrive at the other end. And so after losing a lot of money and doing this a number of times, they figured out that there had to be a cheaper, faster, and better way to do it. And so that really is the genesis of what Transferwise is today. So today we move close to $5 billion around the world each month. And we believe that we're saving our customers close to $1 billion, both by offering them the real exchange rate, which is something that you would see on Google or any other publicly available online website, as well as a very, very low fee for moving your money. A couple of the other innovations I think that we've done, we just announced some statistics last week. So 20% of our transactions now move from one country to another in 20 seconds or less. That means if you were sending money from London to Paris, that money is available in Paris for you to draw at the ATM in the 21st second. And we are also now connected directly into the payment system in the UK, very much like what a bank would do. So I think enough about Transferwise. What I think as well as probably everybody here is going to say is what gave us, I would say, the global success is that we were solving a problem that is a global one. So it is expensive to send money from one country to another, not just in the UK or Europe, but also in the US, in Asia, and certainly in many countries in Southeast Asia. And so as we've grown the business, we've been able to offer a service that's in many cases 8 or even 10 times cheaper than the incumbents and faster. I'd say the second thing that really got us a head start was the favorable regulation that we had in the UK. So our regulator is the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, and at least as long as the UK is in the European Union, we're able to passport that license to 30 countries in the European Union. So we were able to get our business up and running there almost immediately. And then, of course, since then, we have invested in the long and difficult journey of getting licensed now in multiple jurisdictions. But I think that head start really gave us the opportunity to become a global business from day one.
Let's move down to Shane. So you guys are a Series A investor in Gojek, and feel free to talk about the other companies in your portfolio. But what guides your investment philosophy when you're looking at startups? We hear this. Great product, great team, founders, path to profitability. But what do you really look for, and how do you get it out of them?
Yeah, thanks, Chayut. As you said, we're a Series A, Series B focused investor on Southeast Asia. We have 25 portfolio companies now across 2 funds. We're looking after just under 250 million. So Gojek is our best known portfolio company, but I think what we've seen is some amazing progress over the last year, generally in Southeast Asian startups. And we've done investments in businesses such as Finexcel in Indonesia, HelloDoc in Indonesia, Topica, which is in Vietnam and Thailand in the education space, businesses like Bioformus in Singapore. And I think what we're seeing is that the potential for Southeast Asia to create unicorns is accelerating, if anything, backed up by a much stronger ecosystem, attendance at events like this, which is obviously helping to generate excitement, as well as the whole stage of capital from the early stage through to the late stage and exits to help generate excitement around the Southeast Asian opportunity. But I guess coming back to what do we see in Gojek in those early days and what do we look for, I'll let some of the entrepreneurs here and the operators talk more about what it is that drives a great business. Because in some ways, being a VC is a bit easier. We just have to ask the right questions, right? We have to ask about that market, analyze for ourselves how big is that problem, how much of a solution is it, how much traction does it have today, and is it going to be able to survive the forces of competition, regulatory change, and societal change that can happen over time, right? So obviously asking those questions is easier for us to ask the experts, which are the entrepreneurs. But there's 2 other parts to the VC's job, which I would argue are more difficult than, at least as difficult as the entrepreneur's job. The first one is that we need to have our own value add. We need to be able to have our own angle on the way in which we'll contribute to that value build. Because I think if you're just investing in something and you're hoping for the best from the entrepreneur and you think it's a good idea, then you're a portfolio investor. And I don't think that's what we should be doing. So whether it's our unique synergies with our portfolio, our team, our experience, some other way in which we can shift the needle in favor of our investment strategy, then we would prefer not to do it. And I think that's one thing that's tricky but is important as a VC. And the third thing around investing in the potential next unicorn is to have a certain level of X-ray vision. X-ray vision. And that means you need to look into the eyes of the entrepreneur. You need to see that they have the ability to evolve as an opportunity evolves. They have the resilience to ride out bumps, and they need to be able to take their team along with them, take investors and take their team along with them. And you need to look in their eye and see whether they have the sparkle. And is it a unicorn sparkle or is it a decacorn sparkle? And that's really what we're looking for when we invest. Can we find the next decacorn, Gojek, or do we have a whole bunch of unicorns that we can bring to bear in our next portfolio?
So everybody has to have that sparkle in their eye when you're talking to VCs. But let's go to Hendrik with Traveloka. This company is, the latest valuation is about $2 billion, $4 billion. He's doubled it. But what do you think sets Traveloka apart? How did it succeed? Because you were a late entrant into the travel and leisure space. All the engineers have been bought, are with other companies. How did you attract the talent? And how did you, grow the market?
So thanks for that. I've only been in Traveloka 2 years, and the company's been around for 7 years. So you're right, we weren't the first into the OTA space in Indonesia. When we were established in 2012, all the large incumbents, global players were already there. If I were to summarize what might have made us different and what the secret sauce, so to speak, would be two. One would be just an intense focus on product. And I think this has to do with the company having 3 co-founders. All 3 of them were computer science majors. Indonesians who went to school in the US, studied computer science, and then they had 2 to 3 years work experience in some of the leading tech companies in the world, Microsoft, Oracle, LinkedIn. And then they came home. One of them actually came up with the idea, and this is Ferry, who's our CEO now. He was trying to go home from middle nowhere, West Lafayette, Indiana, to middle nowhere, Padang in Indonesia, and it was so difficult figuring out what the connecting flights and so on and so forth were. So being the problem solver that he was, he thought, well, gee, I could do something to solve this. And so Travelokas was born. The other founders were one of his former colleagues at Microsoft. The other one was his schoolmate at Purdue. And the company, having been founded by 3 engineers, was actually quite an advantage to us, because one of the perennial problems in building a successful startup is people. And clearly, building a tech company, you have to have good, solid engineers. And we were fortunate that these 3 guys banded together, and they had a certain amount of notoriety. In high school, they were math and physics Olympiad, gold medalists, and computer science Olympiad, and so on and so forth. So within Indonesia, they had a certain aura about them, and that made the job of recruiting some of the best engineers easier, because if you're a young engineer who went to the MIT Indonesia or the Harvard Indonesia, and you look at these guys, oh gee, he worked at Microsoft, went to HBS and so on, I want to work for him. And that create then in a virtuous cycle of the good attracting the better, and then the best, and so on and so forth. So that's number one, just intense focus on the product. And it's not just the hardcore coding. We actually also place a lot of emphasis on the design. So currently we have 3,000 employees and 150-person strong design department. So one of our founders, his full-time job is making sure that our app is as easy to use as possible. And then really this, when you're operating in the tech space, everything has to be world-class, world standard, because you're competing with anybody else from around the world. So 150-person design department just there to make sure that it's as easy to use as possible. The engineering team is there to make sure the technology is as robust as possible. So, and then the second ingredient, I'd say, would be just choosing the target customer and really being so obsessive about serving that customer correctly. And in our case, we started by focusing on the younger, more budget-oriented travelers, the millennials, so to speak. So these were the a segment that weren't quite so catered by the global incumbents, because they tend to be more very budget-oriented. So by focusing on that, we were able then to build market position. And when we open our Thai office, same strategy. So we focus more on the people traveling domestically, and then people traveling intra-ASEAN, and then outbound to countries outside of ASEAN.
All right. So intense focus on product, delivering easy to use services or goods. Amer, let's go to you. Mobileye, I'll have you introduce it, because it's a camera you stick on your car and tells you how to drive. Go ahead.
It's not only camera. It's Mobileye is a very interesting story, and I see the audience here, and you want to hear about unicorns and technology. So Mobileye today is an Intel company, made an exit for $15.3 billion. I think was big news, but the story is not 2 years old. It's 20 plus years old. And Mobileye started as a very small, typical, I would say, typical startup, Israeli startup in a house with 6 people. Professor Amnon Shashua, who is our founder and a professor of artificial intelligence and computer vision in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, was in a lecture 20 plus years ago in one of the Far East countries. And during the lecture, he mentioned that we can use one camera sensor to extract 3D, to identify 3D shapes in a 3D space. Then one Japanese smart engineer raised the hand from the backside and asked, "Are you sure? Can we extract with one camera 3D identification or object recognition in a 3D space?" And Professor Shashua said yes and continue the lecture. At the end, a group of engineers from Toyota, at the end of the lecture, came to Professor Shashua and he said, they asked him the same question again. "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes. If we can, with one eye, if we can drive, we can close one eye and still drive, still understand, to extract, the brain can still understand, to extract 3D shapes in a 3D space, we can do it with one camera with a strong computing power." They said, "You know, we are trying to solve it for many years, but here we go. Take $100,000 US as research fund." He went back to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, started the research with a number of brilliant students and professors, and they proven the idea. And this is how Mobileye started, with angel investors, small house, 6 people. And the story is long, but today we are the leader company in the world for what we call ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, and autonomous vehicle technology. And we are what we are today because we stick to our objective, to our vision, that we are saving lives and we are changing the world. We are changing the way we drive or we are driven. And that's the take from Mobileye. We stuck in the first 8 years, from 1999 to 2007, with perfect 0 sales, 0. 8 years, but we stick to our objective. We knew that what we are doing is going to change the world until we got our first customer in 2007. It was Volvo. And if you drive today a Volvo, it has a built-in Mobileye technology. Anything has to do with AEB, adaptive cruise control, smart assist, driving assist, is Mobileye technology right embedded in a Volvo car, and there's many like this. But the first 8 years were perfect 0 sales. But we believed in what we did and we are doing.
All right. That's a great story because, of course, it was very big news. There was the IPO, and then there was the acquisition. So what I'm hearing is that this product has to be great. There's a great story, solving problems, and that helps with recruiting. But once you achieve this unicorn status, the story's been heard so often. Does like at Transferwise, does this still resonate with the troops? Does this mission to reduce the cost of transfer? How does that motivate people in such a big company? Because when you're a startup, you're much smaller, right? And you wake up and you want to do this. So how does that transfer, I guess, from a startup sort of structure to a more corporate one?
I feel privileged to work every day with people who believe in our mission, which is about making finance fairer, but also cheaper, faster, and more convenient. And I think even though we're now about 1,600 employees in 10 offices around the world, we've invested in sort of bringing my colleagues and all of our employees along on this journey to show them the impact that they are having. When we launch in a new market, we see that we are substantially cheaper. We also listen to our customers. In fact, all of us are encouraged to actually spend time on our customer support desk, where our customers call in and they'll either tell us what we need to fix and what we need to do better, or often they'll tell us how we've saved them a lot of money in moving, let's say, currency from one country to another. So doing things like that, I think, continues to keep our employees closely engaged to the mission. and keeps them motivated to want to solve this and make at least finance a better option for people, certainly all of us here on this panel and everybody in the audience here.
What about, Hendrik, what about Traveloka? So, it was founded in 2012, so it's about, almost 10 years on. Is the allure of working with these, 3 co-founders still there? How does the company keep it fresh for the new hires? And as you expand to new markets like Thailand, how does that, be replicated? The same success you've had in Indonesia, in the other markets.
So 7 years in, I think people are still very excited to work at Traveloka. It's amazing. I joined 2 years ago, and on average, we hired 20 new people every week. So from 1,500 when I joined, we're a little bit over 3,000 now. So people are still very, very excited. I think most of the people who join are very obsessed or passionate about technology, about creating products. And they also enjoy travel and discovering experiences. So I should say a little bit about this because as a company, we started out as a meta search engine and then became an OTA. But going forward, what we want to do is actually enable our customers to discover things to do in their spare time, free time, leisure time, and not just for when they are traveling to a new destination or new country, but when they are living, staying in their hometown or after work and so on. So if you open our app, at least the Indonesia version, the Thai version is still a little bit more rudimentary. We launch experiences. So in experiences, you could discover restaurants, you could book movie tickets, you could book concert tickets. And concert in general have been like hugely successful. And the last 4 concerts we sold in Indonesia have been completely sold out. So what we're doing in empowering discovery for our consumers, that resonates with hundreds of young employees that want to come work for us because they want to experience things, and then when they have a chance to work with us and help design new products and services, which in turn they themselves can experience in their daily lives, which they can then also recommend to their friends and family, that is hugely motivating for them.
All right. Let me flip the script a little bit here because we've been talking about the secret to success, right? And the factors to look for. And this one is for you, Shane. What are the pitfalls that you can see when a startup is very ambitious? So everybody needs a clear path to profitability, but how do you balance the cash burn with the investment in new growth and revenue? How important is that to you when you analyze, financials or when you speak to founders about how you're expanding, the expansion plan, the amount of cash you're using? Because the point we want to make here is that, becoming a unicorn is a indicator, but it's the exit and how much money you make later for your investors, people like Shane, is the important part. So how do you, identify those things?
Yeah, as a Series A investor, when we make that initial decent-sized check, that's a classic discussion we have with our entrepreneurs and probably one of the biggest decisions we make in the early days of a Series A phase. Is this the sort of product and opportunity where we're just going to be all out for growth? Or is this the sort of product and opportunity where it makes sense for us to make very early moves towards break-even or profitability? And I'm not going to say that open space is in one category or the other. It really does depend on the type of opportunity. If you look across our portfolio, we've got businesses in a fair few platforms, right, where you might be starting to achieve some level of unit cost profitability or achieving unit cost profitability on one product, but it makes sense based on the traction to layer in new products. Right? Our investment in Indonesia in the health space called HelloDoc. It does telemedicine. It's an online pharmacy. Just as the metrics are looking good for that, they added doctor appointments. They added in-hospital coordination. They added an insurance-related product. And in many cases, we want the companies to push for that. It's the job of venture capitalists and growth stage capital to actually take on those risks before you make the move towards proper profitability. And so we have that conversation, we understand what the metrics look like. We're often shooting to make sure that when we understand and have delivered on some of our products, they're profitable, but we also release the spigot and we make sure that you're building a compelling product that is actually creating a lot of customers that you can then cross-sell to. In other situations, we're actually a busy investor in e-commerce, we're investors in SaaS businesses, we've invested in an agri-tech play. I think you have more of a scope in those sorts of plays to immediately push towards, yes, unit cost profitability, and ultimately start to offset many of the overheads and push towards a break-even position. We're privileged in our Fund 1, we're privileged to have about 20% of our portfolio companies which are at break-even or EBITDA positive. And there's no question when you go into the later stage capital raising / exit, it is helpful to get a good value. I don't know what Mobile Eye looked like when you guys sold for 15 billion, but to get those sort of numbers, people are not often investing just on the promise. They need to know that it's a business model that makes sense economically, either standalone or in the eyes and in the balance sheet and the P&L of the acquirer. And so that's a frequent conversation we have, and we're very conscious of it. We model it out. We make sure we're working with our entrepreneurs on that as frequently as we can.
What do you think, Hendrik, as a, you're still raising. Yeah. I think the last raise gave you, 500 million, but how do you balance the cash burn? And you're also looking out for new investments, right? So how do you balance those things? You don't want to be spending too much money, but you want bang for your buck in market expansion.
Sure. No, it's really the classic buy or build type of decision, right? So we raised X $100 million. Some of that could be used to hire people or do marketing and so on and so forth. Could we accelerate our growth or increase our sales or get customer cheaper and so on and so forth by investing in other startups that might be developing some new technology that might have significant impact on how we sell our products, for example? Or could we acquire another company that might be in the OTA space? For example, if we want to expand to another country, we might acquire another OTA. Most of the time, we start out by building it organically. So we're in 7 countries. In each of the 7 countries that we operate in, we've been building it organically. But it might come a time we want to double our market share for strategic reasons, and then we might acquire another OTA. Or we might also acquire another company if we want to enter into a new segment or vertical. So as a business, we are actually operating in 4 verticals. One is transport, which is airline tickets, ground transportation, trains, buses, and so on and so forth. The second one is accommodation, so hotels, home away, and so on. The third one is experiences, again, yesterday in Thailand. Fourth one is financial products. So we're doing this actually as a way to improve our customer experiences. In Indonesia, only about 3% of the population has credit card, less than a third have bank accounts, and yet we have 40 million users in Indonesia. So what we want to do is make the user experience so seamless. We don't want people to choose a airline ticket and then have to get out of the app or website to complete payment. We want everything to happen within our app, because then that will increase user retention, user satisfaction, and they will use the product a lot more frequently. So in that regard, we might be acquiring companies that are operating within that financial products area. Or we could partner up and just do a commercial partnership. Mm-hmm. So all of the above. So in each of these situations, we balance out, okay, if we were to build it ourselves or do it ourselves, how much would it cost? And if we were to invest or acquire, how much would it cost? And how fast can we realize the synergy? And how tough would it be? Because, again, if you're just investing sort of like a venture investor in another startup, you don't own the company outright, but can we realize some synergies by working together? Could the product sell faster if bundled up with a Traveloka product, for example. Or when we acquire another business, it's actually non-trivial. I used to be a venture private equity investor. When I bought a company, it's a lot simpler. Now that I'm in a corporate, when we buy a company, post-merger integration is actually a really big deal. You got to mobilize all these stakeholders because somebody else actually has to integrate the business and make sure things are running smoothly at the same time that they have all these other work that they have to do within the company. So it's non-trivial. But all of that we always calculate in consideration of whether we should do it ourselves or invest or acquire.
So it's classic striking the right balance, and sometimes it's a guessing game too, but you don't want to miss. So we're running low on time, but one of the things that I wanted to draw out was, and we've talked about this earlier before the panel, Amer too, was the environment in which a startup is born in. Mobileye is an Israeli-based startup. The startup nation thing about Israel has been talked about. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Right, that's a good question actually. First of all, for you guys, there's a book not related to Mobileye. It's called The Startup Nation. It's an Israeli book translated to many languages. I strongly recommend you to, it's a good read, and there's a lot of things to digest in that book, so it's recommended. That's out of context. Now, Israel is a unique story. It's a small country. Then the natural resources are very limited. It's no oil, no gas, and the population has to have growth engines. Right away, in the 70s, I guess, Intel, before buying Mobileye, much before, Intel decided to open the first factory, semiconductor factory, out there in Jerusalem. And today, Intel is the biggest employer in Israel after the government and the army and the police. We have Intel employees in Israel are around 10,000 employees. That's the biggest, if I'm not mistaken, that's the biggest number of headcount of employees after United States. And there's a reason for that. Israel quality of human resources is very high. First is the education system, but also the personality of the people. Sometimes you say Israelis are a little bit rude. Jewish people call it chutzpah. You have the courage to ask, to question, to be informal many times. And that's the typical or the average characteristic of an Israeli young man, woman. And if you come today to Mobileye, it is an Intel company, big, 1,400 plus employees, but still you feel, till today, the startup environment, the startup energy, the less formality, the less hierarchy, the positive energy of changing the world, doing something that not only makes money, of course you have to make money, but also make a real impact, to be ahead of the others. All these reasons are part of the Israeli startup ecosystem. Of course, the government also have some, I would say, regulation that help companies, for sure. Last point here, Mobileye being there for 20 years is the leader of Israeli companies that opened the automotive market. Now, keep in mind that Israel has zero number of factories of vehicles. We don't manufacture any vehicle. We don't manufacture vehicles. We don't have Toyota, Honda, or General Motor factories. But today, many, following Mobileye phenomena, if I can say so, General Motors having an innovation center in Israel, Volkswagen have an innovation center in Israel, VinFast, I was talking to the Vietnamese startup, VinFast are looking into establishing an innovation center in Israel. So Israel became a smart mobility hub, and part of it is Mobileye phenomenon of this huge exit.
So there are these preconditions that help bring all these factors together Venkatesh, we were talking a little bit about, we're going to go through this quickly because we're over time, but the regulatory situation. So the government can, in a way, say we want certain things to build a startup ecosystem, but regulation, things that are not, directly related to, raising money and all that. Well, can you talk quickly about, how that helps Transferwise?
So, really quickly, I think the FCA, which is our first regulator and still regulates the parent company, Transferwise, has been really quick to sort of respond to the market needs and also come up with an outcomes-based regulatory approach where they work with companies like us and try to understand what we're doing, and they come up with the right regulatory framework. So they don't force us to say, oh, you're doing some things that look like a bank, and so we should put all of those restrictions that we have on banks, for example. I think equally the speed at which they respond to us in terms of licensing and everything, I think they get that startups need to move much faster than the incumbents, and they're very supportive of that. That is one, but I think the second thing is the British regulatory system also has an excellent reputation around the world. So having that license did open many of the initial doors for us, whether it was Singapore or Australia or Japan or elsewhere. So I think both of those, if I had to sum it up really quickly, have helped Transferwise's journey.
All right, I'm going to wrap up. Does anybody want last words? Sorry? Last words?
Last words for the investor, maybe?
No? No, that's great. Well, we're just right over, so. No, but this has been a great panel. Plenty of insight from the top guys, doing startups, investing in them, and operating in them. We've covered ground where, have a great product. I mean, it's very easy to say, but you got to really invest in it, but then also strike the right balance between buying up all the good stuff and then not making enough money. There's outside factors like the ecosystem around you and the things that you need to do on your own. And also there's things that are, government initiatives that are not specifically about startups, but regulatory changes that could help boost a certain kind of service or product that could help startups and unicorns. So I'd like to thank all my panelists, and could you give a round of applause to these guys? They've been a great job here today.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chayut.
Thank you. Yeah.